I'm Nicola Courtright. I teach art history in the Department of Art and the History of Art here at Amherst College. I guess I'll tell you what I know about Amherst Uprising, or what I experienced about Amherst Uprising. That is, I don't remember when I heard about it. I think I remember hearing, oh my goodness, there's a sit-in at the library. And I wanted to go see, of course, what it was. And I think I heard that it was students of color. So when I came, it was afternoon, and already students had been starting to come by the dozens, I guess. They were there. And I just stood by and started listening to them talking about what they had to say. And at one point that same day, I just stood there for a while, and then I kept standing there, and then I stood there for hours, and then I kept standing there for more hours. So much that there was some upheaval around the dean of faculty, who was trying to answer some of the questions, and it wasn't going so well. And then I learned when I was at the door, all of a sudden in came Biddy. She had turned around from her trip to Japan, had canceled her trip to Japan, and came back to the library, and she began to talk to students. So I was there for that whole time, as I remember. And then, of course, I went, you couldn't not listen. So I went back the next day. And by this time, it was getting to be really big. Already that day, it was getting to be really big. And I have to say, it was maybe the most important moment I've ever experienced at Amherst College, and maybe one of the most important moments of my own life, because I was so impressed by students speaking out so forthrightly and honestly what their experiences were about race and racism on campus, and also class issues, social issues, but mainly, race and racism. That these brave, many, many women, but also guys, were speaking up seemingly with such bravery about what they were experiencing. And honestly, I'd never heard anything like that before. Later, when I thought about it, it reminded me a lot of what women had done in the feminist movement, where they had encounter groups. They would have these little weekly get-togethers with one another and talk about all the things that were really killing them in their daily lives, that were making it very hard for them to be full human beings. And they also would testify to one another. But this was taking it to this whole other level. Like all these young women, but also men, but a lot of women, talking about what they were actually experiencing at the college, that they had maybe only before said privately to their friends, or some of them said they never even talked about it at all, even with their friends, and certainly not with their parents. So that was just mind-boggling to me, and really, really important. That's why I went back. I felt like I had to hear more. I wasn't done. There was so much that students said that really stuck with me, that I'm still thinking about it and talking about it to this day. I was also on the committee of 6 at that time. So that meant the students, the delegations of students came in to talk to the committee of 6, to talk to Biddy separately, but also to talk to the committee of 6. There were demands. We listened. We heard what students had to say. It was more and also very important. And it was so important that Biddy and the dean, I guess, decided that there had to be a faculty meeting about it. So now I'm jumping to the faculty meeting. But I would say before the faculty meeting even, I felt it was really urgently important to talk about the uprising with my classes, in my classes, and only have students talk who felt like talking about it, but they had to talk according to the rules of proper behavior. Like you had to respect other people speaking. You couldn't yell at other people. You had to, you had to be respectful, I guess is the biggest, most important term. So we had a very good conversation. I felt limited in both of my classes. And then because we weren't done in my upper level class, we went back and talked about it the next class meeting, because students wanted to. I really felt like everybody had to talk about what their experience was and why it mattered to them. And again, students were very brave, very courageous to talk about their experiences in the way that they did. I was just totally, totally impressed. So then when the faculty meeting came, I guess I became part of a group of faculty who were personally concerned with the uprising, wanted to make a difference, not only because I was on the committee of 6, but because this seemed of enormous importance to the college. And I'm ashamed that I didn't know all this, I have to say, about students before. I really did not understand to what degree the definition of Amherst had been very constrained, telling people that they had to fit their own identities into what a definition of Amherst was that was very constrained, instead of opening up a definition of what Amherst should be by taking into account the experiences and the needs and the desires of all of its community. So that, I would say, that was one of the things that affected me the most. So when it came time to have a faculty meeting, I guess Biddy had tasked the group of us, an informal group of us faculty, to lead a faculty meeting. And therefore, we met at my house. Those of us who were in that group, we met at my house. They told me I had to lead it, but that was fine, except I really didn't know up to that point what it even meant to be an ally. And I really began to understand that to be an ally, you actually had to inform yourself on your own time and in your own best way to be the best possible ally. So it was at that point that I really began to inform myself about race and society, and not just Amherst, but as a whole. And because I wanted to do a good job. And as I say, I was ashamed that I hadn't done enough of a good job, above all with my students before, but in the world possibly. So anyway, so we had the faculty meeting, it was packed to the brim, and Marissa gave an amazing talk that I hope somebody has a record of. We didn't record it, we should have, that explained what was going on. And faculty asked questions, people were really interested, but people also didn't entirely understand. So I also would go, after the faculty meeting, I went to the science table, the science and math table, the STEM table in Valentine, and the Louis Sebring, talked to people about what it meant. I began to understand that there were very different attitudes among students of color, about students of different classes, and above all, the people that I spoke to among faculty of different ages. It seemed in a certain way that some people, also alums of color, were very put off by the uprising when I talked to them later on. I was trying to make a case for how important this was and why it was so very important. And it was hard, rough going, because they'd had different experiences when they were at Amherst, when they were 20, 30 years ago, when they were students at Amherst, and they couldn't, not the ones that I was talking to, not all could relate to this, what was going on. I felt it was urgent to convey how very important this was to other people, people of different generations, people from other institutions. But it seemed there was really a generational gap going on here. So I felt like my job was to represent as best I could everything that was in the minds of the students who were so brave to speak up at the uprising, and later to carry on and keep it going. I got to know Loretta a little bit, who had told me about what was behind this, that it was this class of Anika Hendersons that had really inaugurated their interest in doing this. I forget what it was called, something like Bad Black Women or something like that. It was a great title. But it was the substance of that class that had really started them off to think, yeah, we've got to talk about all these things that are wrong here. And then it took on this huge form where really hundreds, if not thousands, of people were involved. So afterwards, I did talk to Loretta because she was often in the art building. Talked to some other students that I had a relationship with who'd taken classes with me. I had them out to lunch and talked to them about how they felt about it, what was going on. So I felt like I was expanding my own vision a little bit. I'm worried now, somewhat worried now, that it's over and the last class has graduated who experienced the uprising. And it was a really, really game-changing event, I felt, for Amherst. I think that Amherst has changed as a consequence, and it's certainly changed everything for me here. But I'm hoping that my colleagues, as well as staff, as well as students, can keep the pressure on to make sure this is a place that is better for all students than it used to be. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I should be talking about. What haven't I talked about?
What do you hope the legacy of Amherst Uprising will be for future generations?
I really hope that every single student here can reflect consciously upon what race means and that it matters. White people about their race too, have to really get the idea of what it means to have a certain kind of privilege that not everybody can share. And I think that if all students can have an understanding and respect for one another in that way, we will get a lot farther. It'll be a better place. It'll educate students better. There'll be less barriers in the classroom. There'll be less personal barriers. I think I'm hoping that that's something that we always keep on the front burner. That's what I really hope that it has done for Amherst, and I hope it keeps going in that way for Amherst.